Woke up quick at about noon.
And our first week is in the books here with the Friday, June 7th edition of the podcast with Damien Barling. I am Damien Barling, and I thank you so much for tuning in. I thank you so much for streaming. I thank you so much for downloading wherever you may be. I appreciate you for being here. Plenty to talk about. We got some NFL news to talk about. Another quarterback signs for another record deal. Get used to hearing that. I have a feeling we're going to say it a couple of more times. Of course, we've got Game 4 of the NBA Finals tonight. There was a lot of off-the-court drama. There was a lot of drama involving Golden State Warriors owners and their spouses following Game 3. We'll touch on that. Some of the biggest questions headed into Game 4 tonight. We'll touch on that as well. You could text the show at any point, 916-888-5898. No matter what time you listen to this podcast, whether you're listening to it live when it launches on YouTube or you're listening at your own convenience on one of the many, many, many podcast platforms we are available on. Text your thoughts or just text me to let me know you're listening. I love to hear from you day or night. 916-888-5898. Right after the show went live yesterday, we got word that Kevin Durant will be out for Game 4. And the only little nugget that we got this time is Steve Kerr said, we might see him later in the series.
We're gathering information, second opinion type thing. And so it's sort of open. It's an open question, and as we gather information, we'll know more. But at this point, there's not really anything to report. But we are looking at all of our options and his options. There was no setback. I was hoping that today would be the day when he could get out on the floor. It's not going to be today. It's going to be probably tomorrow, following day, the next couple of days. So the hope would be that he can still make it back, at the end of the series.
So there's our first little bit of optimism when it comes to Kevin Durant potentially playing in the NBA Finals. Though I would argue Steve Kerr didn't sound entirely optimistic. And I wonder what Steve Kerr's preference would be here at this point. I understand the all-world player that Kevin Durant is. I understand he's one of the greatest players on the planet. He's one of the greatest players that plays basketball right now. But at this point, you're 3 games into the series. By the end of Friday night, you're going to be 4 games into the series. You're either going to be locked at 2 apiece or you're going to be down 3-1. I know Kevin Durant is great, but given the fact he got hurt, what was it, Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals? He's been away for a while. Do you think Steve Kerr would have the preference of, let's just rule him out? I mean, if we're not comfortable with where he's at today, how are we possibly going to be comfortable enough to throw him in a live game situation in which our season depends on it? And maybe that, again, is maybe I'm thinking too hard on this. Maybe I'm trying to outthink the room in this situation. You want your best players to play. If Kevin Durant is healthy enough to be on the basketball court, because we keep saying when Kevin Durant gets healthy, he's going to play. If Kevin Durant is healthy, he's going to play. Well, he's not going to be healthy. No matter what happens over the course of the next couple of days, Kevin Durant is going to be a percentage of who he is as a player. And you hear people say, well, I'll take 70% of Kevin Durant. I'll take 60% of Kevin Durant. In theory, that's fine. But when you got Kawhi Leonard on the other side of the ball, when you got Kawhi Leonard guarding you, you can hide him on defense. You don't have to make Kevin Durant be the best player. You don't have to make Kevin Durant be the best defensive player on the floor when he's out there. But you want him to be productive offensively. Well, you can hide him defensively. You can't hide him offensively. And I know Kawhi is banged up, and we talked about that on yesterday's podcast about how that just doesn't seem to be getting a ton of attention here in this series. I guess, 1, because he's playing really, really well, and 2, because there's game-altering injuries on the other team. But I'm guessing Kawhi Leonard with 3 games left in the season, 4 games left in the season, or I guess at this point it'll be 3 games left, steps forward and say, I'll throw everything I have at him on the defensive end. He wants to come back. He wants to come back at 60%. He wants to come back at 70%. Hell, he wants to come back at 80%. I'm going to shut him down on the defensive side of the ball. And what could Steve Kerr and that Golden State Warriors staff possibly see over the next couple of days that's going to make them feel comfortable with putting Kevin Durant out there? Klay Thompson hasn't officially been ruled into tonight's game, though immediately following their Game 3 loss. Klay Thompson said he's ready to play. As a matter of fact,
I knew it. I could feel it. My body feels really good, and just that extra night of rest really helped. I just can't wait to get out here tomorrow.
Ready to go. Tomorrow is tonight. He's ready to go, Game 4. But you knew that was going to be the case because they kept the Klay Thompson decision. They kept that all the way up until the point where they had to divulge it. Under NBA rules, they had to divulge it by a certain time. And then you started getting reports from Woj that, there are members within the Golden State Warrior brass that really don't want Klay Thompson to play tonight. They want him to play the long game here. They want to sit him out in hopes that they can get this game tonight without him, but they want to sit him out in hopes that they'll have him available for the rest of the series. I'm like, okay, so you knew immediately following that loss. Oh, yeah, Klay going to be ready. Klay going to be ready. We know that. He was damn near ready for tonight. He going to be ready. But they haven't officially ruled him in. So, keep your Twitter alerts on, though. I'm very, very confident, as I'm sure all of you are, that Klay Thompson is going to play in tonight's basketball game. As a matter of fact, as you're listening to this, I'm sure shoot around just wrapped up. There probably was already an alert that Klay Thompson is going to play tonight. More focus seemed to have been what happened on the court than what happened on the court. And I understand I'm 100% guilty of that as well. I don't feel like I spent enough time yesterday discussing how great the Toronto Raptors were in that Game 3, and I don't think I've spent enough time talking about how great the Toronto Raptors have been this season. But there is another story attached to Game 3, and it's the behavior of minority owner Mark Stevens, minority owner of the Golden State Warriors. And as we wrapped things up yesterday, punishments were levied, and I'm going to tell you, man, this is a hell of a trend here on the first week of the podcast with Damien Barling, because I think we started the week talking about Roger Goodell and him wanting to reduce preseason games and kind of almost a public negotiation with the NFL Players Association. Then we talked about Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, and extending the safety netting all the way down to the foul pole to ensure fan safety from foul balls and everything headed into the stands. And, here we are. It's very rare that I say this, but I think Adam Silver dropped the ball on this one. They announced a punishment for Mark Stevens. They banned him for 1 season. He's not allowed to be around. He's not allowed to be at games, and the Golden State Warriors said he's not allowed to be around any sort of team activities. And they also fined him $500,000 after his incident with Kyle Lowry in the front row of Oracle Arena. Now, no surprise here. The ban is effective immediately. It's going to run through all next season. It's not year to date. So on June 7th, if there's a NBA Finals game in San Francisco next year on June 8th, he's not going to be able to attend. It extends through the offseason, the preseason, the regular season, and all through next postseason. He's not allowed to be around. When Adam Silver was asked why Mark Stevens had not received a lifetime ban, Silver responded, "I think we recognize that it's not a science in terms of making these decisions. Ultimately, we felt that given how contrite Mr. Stevens was, the fact that he was extraordinarily apologetic, the fact that he had no blemishes on his prior involvement with the NBA or the Warriors, that a 1-year ban seemed appropriate together with the fine." End quote. Now, from what I understand, there's a process. Like, we look at the Donald Sterling situation and think, well, Adam Silver can remove people from ownership. I don't think it's that simple. I think Adam Silver was a extraordinary circumstance. I don't think the board of governors, I don't think the NBA, group can force an owner to sell or a minority owner to sell or force them to give up their stake in the team. But I think there are, and this is still a young story. This story may still be in its infancy. There may still be some things to develop. My feeling is this: Adam Silver says all of that publicly. The NBA has fined him. He's been banned for a year. But privately, they tell Joe Lacob and they tell Mark Stevens, we're going to put this out there. We're going to allow you to save face, but we fully expect for you to sell your stake in the team. and you're welcome back at the arena. You're welcome to sit in Joe Lacob's box. You're welcome to sit in any luxury box you want to. You're not allowed in the front row anymore. You're not allowed to call yourself an owner anymore. You're going to get rid of your stake of this team. You don't have to do it publicly, and we're not going to say that we're forcing you to do it. But we're asking you, this is what we're saying publicly. Privately, this is what we would like you to do. Maybe that's not good enough either. Maybe you want it publicly. Maybe you want your pound of flesh. You saw LeBron's tweet last night. Or a couple of nights ago. Obviously, he's very upset about all this. And I can understand why, because think, it was earlier this regular season, Madison Square Garden, James Dolan, you had a fan yelling, hey, Dolan, sell the team. And if I'm not mistaken, that's exactly what he said. He didn't say it in more colorful terms. He didn't say anything derogatory. He said, hey, Dolan, sell the team. And Dolan gets into an exchange with him and, hey, hold him right there, and tells his security guard to go get him and throw him out the arena and tell him he's not allowed at Madison Square Garden ever again. All because he yelled, sell the team at James Dolan. That dude is not allowed back at Madison Square Garden for a New York Knicks game. He's probably not allowed back at Madison Square Garden, period. But an owner, a minority owner, puts his hands on a player in the front row on the biggest stage that the NBA has, and he only gets banned for a season. My feeling with the James Dolan situation was that's absurd, and the NBA needs to step in. You can't be that thin-skinned. James Dolan is one of the worst owners in professional sports, and he is so thin-skinned because he knows he sucks, and his franchise sucks, and he knows that he's on the verge of losing out to the Brooklyn Nets this offseason. We'll get to that here in just a couple of minutes. But I thought then that the NBA had to step in like, dude, you can't do that. He told you to sell the team. We saw this in Phoenix as well. Someone yelled at Robert Sarver. And perhaps he is the worst owner in the National Basketball Association. We saw a fan yell at him, hey, Sarver, sell the team. Sarver looks up and says, you got any money? What do you want to do? How much you got? He didn't throw him out of the arena or ban him for life from Talking Stick Arena, or Talking Stick Resort, or whatever it's called. He didn't do that. I thought the NBA should have stepped in there. But you have a fan who yelled, sell the team at an owner, he's banned for life. You have an owner who put his hands on a player and he's banned for a year. That's a problem. And if, in my opinion, if the NBA Players Association wanted to make a stink about it, they could. And they'd have a strong case to. Like, they could run with this using nothing more than the example of what I just gave you there. Because I really believe you have to take Donald Sterling out of this conversation, because that's a name that's come up too many times. That was such an extraordinary circumstance that it's just not the same. And as I said yesterday on the podcast, they had been trying to get the Clippers from Donald Sterling for decades. And Adam Silver, his first year in, thought this is a golden opportunity. Let's get this nut job out of here. But I don't think the punishment was strong enough. But again, we'll continue to let the story develop. Perhaps there's more to it. Perhaps Mark Stevens disappears until the NBA Finals are over. And then sometime when it's all nice and quiet, maybe he does get rid of his interest in the team. Remember, these sports owners, and there might be a handful of exceptions, but if you're the owner of a sports team, that in most cases isn't your source of income. Now, for, I think, Jeannie Buss, I think the Buss family, I think their main source of income is the Los Angeles Lakers. Like, the Lakers are essentially a family business, right? I think the same is true for Mark Davis and the soon-to-be Las Vegas Raiders. But you've got oil guys, you've got tech guys, you've got computer guys, you got all these different guys who earn money, and it's like, what's the ultimate club that I can get in with my money? I can just whip it out and throw it along the measuring stick and say, hey, this is me. I'm an owner. I've got courtside seats. I'm sitting down just a little bit from Joe and his wife and Beyonce and Jay-Z. That's a whole other story that seemed to have emerged yesterday. But that's the ultimate measuring stick. You tell all your buddies, I'm an owner of the Golden State Warriors. I'm an owner of a professional sports team. Because there's not very many of them. It's a measuring stick. That's all it is. This dude, Mark Stevens, we found out, what we were, $2.3 billion? Whatever stake he has in the Golden State Warriors does nothing to his bottom line. Yeah, absolutely nothing. From what it sounds like, if I, followed the breadcrumb trail properly, he's just buddies with Joe Lacob. And his buddy was like, hey, I'm a billionaire. You're a billionaire. Why don't you be a part owner of the Golden State Warriors? Sure, there aren't very many of those. Get courtside seats, get to hang out. That'll be fun. That's all that this looked like to me. Well, you put your hands on a player. You embarrassed the Golden State Warriors. You embarrassed the NBA. And now you lose those privileges. Period. Not for a year. You lose them. You gone. You lose them. That's how it should be. Kyle Lowry spent a lot of time talking about this yesterday.
I was furious. I'm not going to lie. It took me a couple minutes. I believe we called a timeout, and I was pretty upset. And, I knew it would be a big deal, but I didn't know it would be as big of a deal as him being a part of the group that writes the checks. And that makes it even more of a place where he should know this is what happens when you sit courtside. It just happens, and you can't, you can do what you want. And obviously he did what he wanted to do at that moment. And he wanted to push me and, curse at me.
And so there you have it. Then you had the incident. I guess this was more of a social media incident. Joe Lacob's wife was leaning over across Beyonce to ask Jay-Z if he wanted a drink and what exactly he wanted to drink. And apparently Beyonce's facial expressions changed a little bit too much for the internet. And Beyonce's rather enthusiastic, to use a politically correct term, enthusiastic fan base went to work on Joe Lacob's wife there on Instagram and on various social media platforms. That's the ugly side of social media, man. We all know it exists, especially when you're in a public spot. Hell, I'm in the smallest of small public realms, and social media is a bitch, man. Like, it sucks. Like, I lost my job, and I lost it very publicly, and because it was never said plainly why, because of the type of personality I had and because of the style of show we did, there were all sorts of theories being floated out and being fed by various people about why our show isn't on the air. And again, not even remotely close to the same thing. I'm just trying to speak on the good and the bad of social media, like what we saw with Beyonce and Joe Lacob's wife. That's the ugly side. And I don't even know, like Beyonce's fan base freaked out because her facial expression changed. It's like Beyonce has to look happy all the time, and if her facial expression changed and she doesn't look happy, who's the nearest person that we could blame? There's a good side to social media too. Like, this podcast wouldn't exist without social media. I wouldn't have believed there was a strong enough interest. No matter how good our ratings were, it's still difficult to quantify, like, okay, we're gone. People who listen on the radio, they're just going to move on to something else. Like, who really has the desire to follow me, just me, not the rest of the show, but just me, over to an entirely different platform that you have to search out and you have to make an effort to go find? If I hadn't got, and I'm probably a little, introspective here because we're a week in and the podcast has proven to be a big success. It was really successful this first week, and I'm so thankful for everybody who did reach out on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and email and text and all of that, who posted on my social media pages, who posted on KHTK's social media pages. I'm so grateful, because if you hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have believed there was interest out there. And my social media numbers went up immediately after the show being taken off the air, which I found funny. But it did, and people reached out, and we were able to do this. We were able to launch this. So I believe that social media is, at its core, incredibly evil. There's a lot of really, really good stuff that can come about of it. And as much as I'd love to use this incident with the Warriors owners and Beyonce and the Beehive and all of that to trash social media, man, I can't, because I launched this podcast based on the response I got from you on social media. There's a lot more to talk about with this game. There's a lot more to talk about in the NBA. Here's a couple of things to think about as we hit pause here. We'll get back to Game 4 of the NBA Finals in just a little bit. The Raptors are up 2-1, and a lot of people are talking about the Golden State Warriors being on the brink and all of this. The Raptors have two players on their roster right now, Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka. Both of those players have been in series against this version of the Golden State Warriors, and they've been up 2-1 and lost. Marc Gasol played with the 2015 Grizzlies. They were up 2-1. Serge Ibaka, of course, played with the 2016 Oklahoma City Thunder when they were up 2-1 in a playoff series against these Warriors. I think that Thunder team actually went up 3-1. That's the forgotten blown 3-1 lead. The one that the Thunder had, because the Warriors immediately did it against the Cleveland Cavaliers in the very next series. So I'd have to imagine that Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka's voices in the locker room are very, very loud over the course of the last couple of days. Like, hey, we've been there. We've seen this. We've done that. Don't fall for it. Everybody's hyping you up on television. Everybody's hyping you up on social media. Don't fall for it. Don't believe this Warriors are on the brink. Don't believe any of that. We've got a game to play. We've got a game plan to execute, and they've got a piece almost certainly coming back in the name of Klay Thompson. And I've got a lot of questions about Klay Thompson and his impact on tonight's game, and we'll get to those here in just a little bit. A sneaky big NBA story. Earlier in the week, there started to be a lot of conversation about Kyrie Irving and his potential interest in the Brooklyn Nets. And I always thought if you really wanted to go to New York, and we had said this on the radio show a number of times this year, if you really wanted to go to New York, why wouldn't you go to Brooklyn? Brooklyn right now is in a far better situation than the New York Knicks are. Brooklyn has a playoff team. Brooklyn has a guy who can be a star already on the roster. Now, he's due for a healthy contract this offseason, but still, Brooklyn Nets have the opportunity to be the first ones to take advantage of that. I always thought, why wouldn't Brooklyn be in the conversation for Kyrie Irving or Kevin Durant? Well, if it wasn't before, it seems to certainly be now, as the Brooklyn Nets traded Allen Crabbe in his $18.5 million contract. Oh, yes. I remember getting the news alert about Allen Crabbe's contract during that summer of money in the NBA. They're trading him to the Atlanta Hawks. That is clearing $46 million in cap space. You now have room for 2 max free agents. Man, it is insane how history repeats itself. As great of a basketball player as LeBron James is, and you can argue moving forward whether LeBron James is the greatest basketball player of all time or not, LeBron James' greatest impact is what he did with his 2010 free agency. The fact that he didn't immediately sign with his team, the fact that he didn't sign with the Cleveland Cavaliers during the season, the fact that he didn't sign any extension and he went to free agency, and you started to see teams clear. They just threw money away, threw players. Let's clear space. We need room because we might have a chance to land LeBron James. Everybody who had a meeting with LeBron James that offseason, probably with the Cleveland Cavaliers as the lone exception, everyone who had a meeting had cleared tons of cap space to make sure that they could sign him and someone else. The New York Knicks barely had anyone on their roster. Chicago had room. We ultimately saw what Miami did to gut their roster and create all sorts of space for 3 max-ish players. And I think that is LeBron's greatest impact. If LeBron James doesn't leave the Cleveland Cavaliers for the Miami Heat in 2010, I don't think Kevin Durant leaves the Oklahoma City Thunder and goes and plays with the Golden State Warriors. Free agency is now, not that free agency was always a thing, but it was never what it is now before that summer of 2010. Never. Because now you're not talking about signing a free agent that can change your franchise for the next 5-10 years. You're talking about signing multiple free agents that can change your franchise for the next 5-10 years. You start looking at teams now, well, it's not how much cap space do they have, it's do they have enough cap space to sign multiple free agents? Well, they've got enough to sign LeBron James, but do they have enough to sign anybody else? Do they have enough to sign him some help? Because everybody needs help. Everybody needs, you want to be a championship team? You need multiple max players, right? Right? Toronto? Don't you need multiple max players? No. The Dallas Mavericks, you need multiple? Oh, no. See, people are forgetting this run with the Golden State Warriors started. They didn't have multiple max players. In fact, I don't think they had any. Draymond hadn't been extended yet. Steph had signed at the time, market value contract. And who was Kevin Durant there? Well, I guess Draymond signed his extension. He signed his big extension. And then they signed Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant, I think, was their first true max player. But we're under this belief that, well, you've got to do it the way the Miami Heat did it. But when you look at it, it's like, well, no, you really don't. San Antonio didn't. Dallas didn't. Now, Cleveland certainly did. It seems like teams associated with LeBron James do that. But there are other teams in the time span since 2010 they've done the same thing. And I honestly thought when we saw Miami lose to that Dallas team, and then when we saw Miami lose that second time to the Spurs, I thought, okay, this whole theory of three guys teaming up is going to die. Like we're at the end of this. Because it's been shown enough that it doesn't work. It didn't make the New York Knicks relevant when they had Carmelo Anthony and a still, at the time, really good Amari Stoudemire. It didn't work. It didn't lead to anything. I thought there was enough evidence that it didn't work that it might die. It very much has not died because we're no longer pairing guys together. We're putting like trios together. Got to have three guys. You got to have a big three. And now we've got this situation in Brooklyn where they've got $46 million in cap space by being able to dump Allen Crabbe. They're getting Prince back from Atlanta, and it's like, okay, I like Brooklyn. I certainly like Brooklyn a hell of a lot more than I like the New York Knicks. And I think, much like the Los Angeles Lakers, the New York Knicks are coming up empty. Because I just can't envision a scenario where someone says they want to sign with that owner. Now, I know that Scott Perry and David Fizdale have a tremendous amount of clout and respect from the players in the NBA. I don't know that that's going to be enough. I don't know that's going to be enough at all. And why do we pretend like Brooklyn is some small market? Yo, Brooklyn is New York. We talk as if Brooklyn is just some... it's just this, like it's Oklahoma City or some tiny market out there. Like, nah, it's New York, dog. And if you've never been to Brooklyn, Brooklyn is live. Brooklyn is a dope place to be. It's not where Madison Square Garden is. It's not where the ball drops. It's not Times Square, but it's a pretty dope place to be at. I'll tell you this: I've run the New York City Marathon a couple of times. And one of the coolest moments about running that marathon is there's a stretch, and it's a pretty lengthy stretch, like near the middle where it's really dull and it's really hard and you're just looking for some sort of motivation. It's like miles 13, 14, 15. You're kind of in darkness. You're under bridges. You're not, like when you think about the New York City Marathon, you're not thinking about this. In fact, when you're running it, you're like, dude, this is trash. Who hyped this up, man? This sucks. And dude, all of a sudden, you emerge out of this tunnel where you're coming out from underneath a bridge and you're in Brooklyn, and man, the place explodes. There is music blaring from apartment buildings. There are people. There's just people as far as the eye can see. 10, 15, 20 rows back. Now, these aren't the bleachers like at Central Park where you finish and there's like cheering spectators, and for unathletic dopes like me, it's the closest to a sporting event I'll ever be a part of that has a live crowd cheering you on. It's not that. It's just people that got up, came out of their apartments, came out of their houses, just came into the heart of Brooklyn and started cheering. It is by far, for me, the most memorable part of the New York City Marathon, man. And that's Brooklyn. That's the way Brooklyn is. Brooklyn stays live. And so I'm in. I like this rumor. This is a conversation I like. I'm in on this. I hated New York. I hated the Knicks. I hated that idea. But if we're talking Kyrie Irving and someone else headed to Brooklyn, I'll sign up for that. I'll absolutely sign up for that. We're going to talk more about the NBA Finals coming up here in just a couple of minutes as the podcast with Damien Barling continues. If you're listening, just shoot me a note. Hey, D-Lo, I'm listening. I'm enjoying the podcast. Or like my man Steven texted me yesterday. He was like, hey, love the podcast, man. Try to add some music to it. I'm definitely going to add some music to it. I'm kind of tiptoeing around this. I'm learning the different rules with YouTube. So I've got to be careful with my music, but that's definitely going to be a part of the podcast moving forward, as are video versions of the live stream. But just shoot me a text. Let me know that you're listening, day or night, whatever it is, weekday or weekend. I want to hear from you. 916-888-5898. That is a direct line right to me. 916-888-5898. You can connect with me on social media as well. It's Damien Barling across all platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And the absolute best form of advertisement, word of mouth. Tell your friends. Kings fans, I know there are people listening in different states, so I appreciate you. I don't know how you found it. I don't know if we're friends through social media. I don't know if we're friends in real life, but I can see the downloads in the different states that they're coming from, man. So let's just grow this thing nationally. I appreciate you. I appreciate every single one of you. And if you're in the Sacramento area, one of my favorite places in Sacktown is the Vibe Health Bar. I've talked a lot about them on the radio show. I post pictures of myself or post videos at the various locations all the time on my Instagram stories. Uriah Faber is associated with them. Matt Barnes is associated with them as well. And Vibe Health Bar right now is giving you and a friend lunch every month for a year. Head over to Instagram or Facebook, search out Vibe Health Bar, and leave a comment on one of those videos from Uriah or from Matt Barnes, and you'll have a chance to be one of the 5 people selected to win lunch for you and a friend every month for the next year. So if you're listening on Friday, this is the last day. Friday is the last day to enter that contest. So make sure you go do that. They're going to draw their winners. 5 winners. They're going to draw them here pretty soon. And when you get a chance to go, make sure you check out the Cacao Town or the City of Tree smoothies. Those are my favorite. Oh, and they got the Impossible Burger there too. Seriously, it's my favorite place. It's my favorite place in the city. So you got to go check them out. It's National Donut Day. No, Vibe Health Bar, they're not about donuts, man. They're about health. But it is National Donut Day, so you kind of gotta celebrate. If there are any vegans listening, Milk Money always has they got good Milk Money on in the ice blocks on R Street. Again, this is for my Sacramento people. They've got great donuts. Pushkins every Sunday, bruh. Might want to get in on that. And we'll ask Carson Wentz to buy us some donuts and some Vibe Health Bar, because he just got a fat contract extension, a 4-year extension that'll run through the 2024 season. The extension is worth, I always try to give you the real dollars, $107 million. It has a chance to escalate up into fake money of $144 million. You factor in his current years, because he has a couple of more years on his current deal. If you factor all of that in, he has a potential max of $170 million. Remember, that's not real. The $170 million is not real. The 107 is. It's very real, and it's very equal, because that's a thing. It's very equal to what Russell Wilson got back in April when he signed the 4-year, $140 million extension with the $107 million in guarantees. $107 million for Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, what was it? He missed the last 3 games of the season. He came back in week 3 from the injury that he had suffered the year before, and he went 5-6 with a really head-scratching Philadelphia Eagles team through the 11 games that he played. He put up pretty good numbers. 21-7, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions during those 11 weeks, but the 5-6 record, He missed the remainder of the season. Of course, Nick Foles comes in, plays superhero again, and had us wondering if the Philadelphia Eagles were going to win the Super Bowl again on the back of Nick Foles. But when you have a guy that you believe to be your franchise quarterback, you've got to lock him up. You don't do that with any other position in the NFL except for quarterback. You've got to lock him up long term. And now, as this was the case with Russell Wilson back in April, you report the figure, you report the $107 million, you talk about what this means for Russell Wilson, you talk about what this means for the Seattle Seahawks and what this means for them moving forward. Now, the next question with Russell Wilson was, okay, who's next? Who's going to be the next guy to get that big contract? And the three names that came up were Dak, Goff, and Carson Wentz. So here's Carson Wentz signing for basically an equal amount of guaranteed money as Russell Wilson has. Of course, I don't want to. I feel like I'm talking down about Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, when he got injured, he was an MVP candidate. And I don't think he was an MVP candidate. I think he was the MVP. When Carson Wentz went down with that ACL, he was the MVP of the league. He was going to win that trophy that year. And, things happen. He goes out, comes back in week 3. Philadelphia as a team really, really struggled. It wasn't on the back of Carson Wentz that team was 5-6. That was a really just strange start to the defending Super Bowl champions. But they were able to get going, and then, of course, they were able to get going, make the playoffs on the back of Nick Foles, and now you're starting to look at, they did it again without Carson Wentz in the lineup. How are you going to approach this? Well, that was answered really, really quickly when they allowed Nick Foles to go sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars. That solidified Carson Wentz is our guy. We're going to pay him big money, and we're going to keep him here for a very, very long time. So, as we did with Russell Wilson, we've got to ask, who's next? Well, there are 2 more names on the list that we were talking about. There's Jared Goff, same draft, and Dakota Prescott. Dakota Prescott, same draft much later. By the way, they've got the same agent, which this guy is living the life. He is living the good life. Ryan Tolner, good for you. He represents both Carson Wentz and Jared Goff. Don't you just go into the negotiations with the Los Angeles Rams and say, hey, you saw what my guy got. You saw what Wentz got. Fork it over. But I think this is a compelling conversation because I asked you over on my Facebook page, who you got moving forward in the future? Who do you like? Jared Goff or Dak Prescott? And I think I thought that was a fun question because I think there's still a lot of questions about Jared Goff. There's no questions about the Los Angeles Rams. And it seems everybody loves, I don't know if you had the chance to hear what Blake Bortles said or read what Blake Bortles said about Sean McVay. For those who have forgot, Blake Bortles is now on the Los Angeles Rams. He said, I've never been coached like this. I've never seen coaching like this. So the praise for Sean McVay continues to roll in. And sometimes you hear the term as it relates to quarterbacks, system quarterback, in that Jared Goff can succeed under Sean McVay, but perhaps he couldn't succeed anywhere else. Now, I don't know that that's a fair label yet. And hopefully we don't get an opportunity to find out because I want to see the Los Angeles Rams succeed. We got another Rams story coming up here in just a few minutes, by the way. But I asked you over on Facebook, moving forward, who would you rather have, Goff or Dak? Well, let's throw a couple of numbers at you here real quick before I get to some of your responses. Jared Goff's career record, remember he didn't start immediately his first year because of Jeff Fisher. 24-14 is his career record. Now, if I remove Jeff Fisher from the equation, completely wipe out Jeff Fisher and just go with his 2 years with Sean McVay, Jared Goff, 24-7 as a starting quarterback. Dak started right out of the gate because of the injury to Tony Romo and because of the ankle injury to, was it Kellen Moore? Dak, 36-16. 3 years as a starter, has made the playoffs 2 of those years, missed the playoffs the year that Ezekiel Elliott was suspended 6 games. That team finished 9-7, and I wholeheartedly put all of the blame that season on the coaching staff. Because if you look at those first 3 games without Ezekiel Elliott, that coaching staff tried to make Dak Prescott do everything by himself. They had Alfred Morris there, who I thought was a very suitable replacement for Ezekiel Elliott during that 6-game stretch. They refused to trust him. They refused to go to him. They split carries with him and Rod Smith, and I think they scored 6 points, 5 points, and maybe 7 points in that 3-game stretch. It was a disaster. But I won't blame Dak Prescott for that. I'll blame the coaching staff. I'll blame Jason Garrett. I'll blame everybody else associated with making Dak Prescott. Maybe it's Jerry Jones calling the plays, because we know Jerry loves Dak. And he has said on a million occasions he's going to pay Dak Prescott. But the question is, how much is he going to pay him? Are we talking $107 million plus guaranteed, like we just saw with Carson Wentz and Russell Wilson? Because is the person who signs first, whether it's Goff or Dak, is the person who signs first at an advantage or a disadvantage? Because I feel like these are two pretty equal caliber quarterbacks, and when I look at the responses that I got here on Facebook, it was pretty much split. This is from my man Matt. I love Goff, but I have no proof that guy can last the season. Dak, a bit limited, but he shows up to play every Sunday. Yeah, that's fine, but sometimes showing up to play for Dak Prescott means throwing 170 yards. Like, they put a lot of their pressure on Ezekiel Elliott. And in their defense, if it were up to me, I would rather put the pressure on Ezekiel Elliott than Dak Prescott. My man Sean, he responded, tough one. Still think neither has truly proven themselves yet. I'd go with Dak, though. Think he has a better makeup, more grit right now. So that's pretty much the way the responses went. Some went Goff, some went Dak, but it was split right down the middle. When you're an organization and you've got to start paying these guys and you got to start talking contract negotiations with Goff right now makes $2.9 million. Dak makes $630,000. And I do believe, especially in football, there is a services rendered price tag that you should have as a football player. Meaning, if you outperform your contract, if you greatly outperform your contract, you should get a sizable guarantee the following year. Now, that might play into a better picture for non-quarterbacks. Because if you're throwing services rendered money at quarterbacks, these contracts, especially with guys who were taking in the 4th round like Dak Prescott, where they're going to go even further through the roof. They're just going to continue to escalate. And everyone says the contract that's going to break the bank is the Patrick Mahomes one. Patrick Mahomes has already won an MVP. So what are we talking about here with Goff and Dak? You got to pay him because they've proved they can win. We just gave you the records right there, 24-14, 36-16. 2 out of the 3 years Dak makes the playoffs. You got to pay him. But what's the number that you pay him? And if Goff signs first, does that put Dak at an advantage or a disadvantage? Because I can't envision a scenario where Jerry or Stephen Jones goes to the table and goes, we don't think Dak is as good as Jared Goff. Because the argument is going to be, well, the market was set. Look at what Goff did. You don't even have to use Russell Wilson as an example anymore. Because Russell Wilson has a Super Bowl championship. He's been to multiple Super Bowls. It's tough to use him as an example. Because if you're Dak Prescott's agent, you go to the negotiating table and we go, we want what Russell Wilson got. If I'm Jerry or Stephen Jones, I go, yeah, me too. I want a Super Bowl ring. I want multiple Super Bowl appearances. Now his agent doesn't even have to do that. He could just go to the table and go, I want what Goff is going to get. Or if he signs second, I want what Goff got. Or I want what Carson Wentz got. Neither one of those guys have been to the Super Bowl. Obviously, Carson Wentz does have a ring. He wasn't the leader behind it. He put them in great position to be in the Super Bowl. I'm not diminishing what he did during that year in those games before he got hurt. I'm just saying he wasn't on the field to beat the New England Patriots. Nick Foles was. Jared Goff ain't got there yet either. This to me, more than anyone, helps Dak Prescott in his contract negotiations. And so does the fact that Jerry Jones has publicly said on multiple occasions, we are going to pay him and we are going to lock him up for a very long time. Speaking of the Los Angeles Rams, Maurice Jones-Drew, former NFL running back, he works as a radio analyst for the Los Angeles Rams right now. He said yesterday that Todd Gurley was actually hurt because if you recall, in those final weeks of the season when C.J. Anderson emerged as a juggernaut in the backfield of the Los Angeles Rams, we kept asking, like, yo, what is going on with Todd Gurley? He suffered an actual injury during a game, and I think he missed a week or two. Then he came back, and I think he had one effective game through the rest of the season and into the postseason. Well, according to Maurice Jones-Drew, Todd Gurley was hurt for the entire year. And he wasn't listed on the injury report until week 16. That was the first game that he missed. But Maurice Jones-Drew is saying he hurt his knee in the first game of the season. Quote from Maurice Jones-Drew here. Yes, he was banged up throughout the season. He got hurt in week 1, played through it the rest of the season. He got banged up in week 1. He got kind of worn down towards the end of the season. Okay. All right. He went on to say Todd has a plan to be ready throughout the course of the season. They want to make sure they don't run Todd as much as they did last year and the year before, all the way to where he can't perform in the last 2 games of the season. Now, we knew when the Rams season ended, we were probably going to start hearing stories regarding Todd Gurley's health because it was pretty baffling, and it was quite the sizable question mark in the NFL during the final weeks of the regular season and leading into the postseason for a Los Angeles Rams team that a lot of people had very, very high expectations for. And I imagine a lot more people are going to have high expectations for them again heading into the upcoming season. But you had to know that theories, I mean, we've started to hear, what was arthritis? We've started to hear all sorts of things regarding why Todd Gurley was so banged up. But I think we need to start using the term that we use in basketball when it comes to running backs in the NFL. Load management. We got to monitor Todd Gurley's load management. You got to get another quality back in there to help him out. Todd Gurley may have ruined, I've always said Sean Alexander ruined contracts for running backs because he won the MVP, he signed a big contract, and he figuratively fell off the planet. Maybe he literally fell off the planet. I don't really know where Sean Alexander is. But I know after he signed that deal, he stopped playing quality football. And now Todd Gurley kind of resets the market like, okay, it's been down. It's franchise after franchise after franchise tag. Le'Veon Bell's unhappy. You're starting to wonder what's going to happen with Ezekiel Elliott over the course of the next year and a half. Todd Gurley signs the deal. Great. And then he just kind of putters out at the end of the season. And now you've got owners, sitting in owners' meetings together going, man, we can't pay running backs. Look at what they do to us. They constantly let us down. We can't pay these guys. We can get guys like they had in Pittsburgh who just walk off the sideline and they go rush for 120 yards. We need more of that. We're just going to use those guys. You got Leonard Fournette drafted in the first round. I thought that was a great pick. For a year, I don't know how I feel about that pick anymore. But again, it falls into the argument of you can't take running backs high, you can't sign them in big money. I think Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott are both exceptions to that. I think Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott are exceptions to both of those unwritten rules, I guess. I think Saquon Barkley is a phenomenal running back who is going to help create a dynamic offense if Eli or Daniel Jones, whoever is going to be the quarterback, if they can get a little bit of protection, I think Saquon Barkley is going to be a difference maker for the New York Giants. We know that Ezekiel Elliott is a difference maker for the Dallas Cowboys. Now you have all sorts of other issues why Dallas might be reluctant to extend Ezekiel Elliott, and the fact that we keep seeing him on TMZ. I think if Jerry Jones sets the parameter like, hey, Zeke, if you can stay off TMZ for the rest of the offseason and the entire NFL season, we'll talk about a nice little chunky contract extension for you. But until then, man, you've got to stay off of there. I think the incident with the security guard was, I don't think it was overblown. Like, he shouldn't. Like, why are you trying to bulk up on a security guard, man? Let the guy do his job. Not everybody cares that you're Ezekiel Elliott. Get out of the way. He said you said you can't be here. Just because you're Ezekiel Elliott doesn't mean you're allowed to be there. He tried to swole up on the guy. I don't think he really, he got a little too close to him. He kind of fell over sort of a guardrail. That part is overblown, but that's Zeke still being a rich, privileged turd. Like, man, you don't belong there, man. The dude was doing his job. Get out the way. And for God's sakes, man, stay out of freaking trouble. You're literally ruining it for everybody. Like, every running back is like, Zeke, bruh, can you stop? We need you to do what Le'Veon Bell couldn't do. We need you to reset the market for us. But, of course, if Le'Veon Bell couldn't do it, maybe no one can. By the way, you know what story I missed yesterday? I meant to bring this to you. Did you see the Le'Veon Bell story where, he went to the gym or something? Apparently, he had some female companionship at his house, and he left for a little bit. He went to the gym or something, came back, and a bunch of jewelry was stolen. Like a significant amount of jewelry was gone. $525,000 worth. Bruh, like, why are men so stupid when it comes to women? Like, men are such idiots when it comes to women. Like, you're Le'Veon Bell. You've got all of that stuff in your house. You got 2 shorties at the house, man. Hey, good for you. That's fantastic. But you was on the level with them where you felt like you could leave the house with that level of jewelry in your possession. Says Bell returned from the gym. His closet was in disarray. His jewelry was missing, including 2 gold chains with diamonds, a Black Panther pendant with black and white diamonds, and a Rolex watch. The combined value of the items, $520,000. On that note, as stupid as Le'Veon Bell is for that, do these women think, what, they think they were just going to get away? Like, oh, no one's going to notice. Like Le'Veon's not going to notice that we rummaged through his closet and got $500,000 worth of jewelry. He's not going to notice that a Black Panther pendant is gone or a Rolex watch is gone. Better yet, he's not going to notice that we're gone. Come on, man. I'm sorry, Le'Veon. I don't know who's dumber in that situation. The 2 women are you. You both share equal stupidity. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, please help to spread the word. We're starting from scratch here on the podcast. If you haven't yet, please subscribe on iTunes or whatever your favorite podcast platform is. It really doesn't matter which one. Take a split second to hit the stars, whether you think this show is worth 5 stars. If you only think it's worth 4, that's fine. If you think it's worth less, just rate it what you think this is worth. But let me know what you think about it. And if you have a few extra moments, you can leave a review. I really appreciate the reviews that have come pouring in through this first week. They are incredible, and I can't stress enough how they help, particularly on Apple Podcast, how they help with that Apple Podcast algorithm. It's a huge, huge help every time you hit those stars. So we greatly appreciate that. And even if you subscribe through one of those podcast platforms, make sure you subscribe on YouTube as well. We're going to be starting the live video stream here pretty soon. I'm working on getting some equipment together. And like I said, we're building this thing from scratch, man. So I'm still trying out a lot of things that will make this podcast experience more enjoyable for all of us. Just search Damien Barling, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's in one of those podcast platforms. You'll have no problem finding it. The YouTube channel is a lot of fun. I try to upload my clips that I do on television appearances like Sports Extra and Sports Sunday with Sarah and my guys Joe and Marshall. They're kind enough to send me those clips every time we wrap up. Some of the old stuff with the lowdown is on there as well. You can head over and check that out. Again, I greatly appreciate it. Before we leave football, if you were scrolling around social media last night, you saw that the New England Patriots players, coaches, team executives, they all got their championship rings last night at a private party at Robert Kraft's residence. A couple of notes here on the Super Bowl rings. It is the largest Super Bowl ring ever. It's crafted in 10-karat gold. It has the Patriots logo on it, brought to life by custom-cut red and blue stone. 38 diamonds surround the logo with an additional diamond set in the star. The Patriots logo rests atop 6 Lombardi trophies, set with 123 diamonds. The total weight of the diamonds is 8.25 carat. Each ring features 20 round genuine blue sapphires that are about a weight of 1.6 carats, which brings the total weight of the ring to 9.85 carats. No word on the cost of this championship ring. And of course, the Tom Brady picture later emerged with him sitting at a table and all 6 of his Super Bowl championship rings on his fingers. The Cup will be in the building tonight when the Blues secured a very controversial Game 5 victory over the Boston Bruins yesterday, 2-1. They take a 3-2 lead. Again, the Cup will be in the building on tonight. And I feel like we've said this a lot. There's some bad missed calls in hockey. I feel like that's been a theme here through the Stanley Cup playoffs. I love the presentation of the Stanley Cup. It is as good as it gets. So I'll be keeping an eye on that as well. A couple of things I missed, really just one major thing I missed this week. That this was brought to my attention by the champ, my former producer, Chris Verlaut. Apparently, earlier in the week was the 30th anniversary of the cinematic classic starring one Hulk Hogan, who played a professional wrestler named Rip. No Holds Barred. That was the movie that brought us Zeus, a.k.a. Debo, a.k.a. Tiny Lister. If you've never seen No Holds Barred, my suggestion to you is don't. The movie is awful. As you would expect, it's starring Hulk Hogan, for God's sakes. But as a kid, though, I can't lie, man. As a kid, No Holds Barred was my jam. Not only did I see No Holds Barred in theaters, but I also ordered the No Holds Barred pay-per-view, where you got the movie with a steel cage match that came on right after the movie, where it was, who was it? Hulk Hogan and I think Brutus Beefcake against the Macho King and Zeus. Oh, yeah. I was all about No Holds Barred as a kid. Adult version, not so much. But as a kid, I was all about it. Game 4 of the NBA Finals is tonight. I've got a couple of questions as we wrap things up here. A couple of people I want you to hear from as well before I get to these questions. Let's start with Kawhi Leonard. They're up 2-1. Here's what he had to say about that.
And it's the same mindset. If we didn't feel like we could be here, we wouldn't be here right now. Simple as that. I have the same confidence. Can't let losses or wins affect that. You know, that's why we're here. We have confidence.
Like they are, you learn some things about how you need to play against these teams each and every game, and then it's a matter of can you do it? And then it really becomes a matter of can you make the shots at the end of it? And I think we did a really good job of that last night. We moved the ball a lot better, and that was a big part of the offensive success.
Of course, that's Kawhi Leonard, followed by the head coach of the Toronto Raptors, Nick Nurse. Game 4 tonight. A couple of questions I have as we head into this game. Where was Klay Thompson missed more? We saw what Steph Curry had to do offensively. We ran down the stat line of 47 and all of the rebounds and all of the points and all of the assists and the steals and everything he did. Counting his assist, I think the number was 63. He accounted for 63 of the Golden State Warriors, 98 points. And part of that has to be just, he even acknowledged this postgame. Yes, I had to do more with Klay Thompson out. I had to do more offensively with Klay Thompson out. But my question to you is, was Klay Thompson missed more offensively or defensively? Because remember, the Raptors hit 17 threes in Game 3. Follow-up question, would they have done that with Klay Thompson in the lineup? Remember, as great as a shooter as Klay Thompson can be, he is an elite defender. Now, we know there were rumors, maybe Kevon Looney will be able to play in the NBA Finals, and I think all of this stuff about maybe these guys are going to be able to play, maybe these guys are going to be able to play, maybe that was Kevon Looney's camp that put that out there. I have no idea. But I can tell you this, they missed him in Game 3. And as much of a fan of DeMarcus Cousins as I am, we all know DeMarcus Cousins' shortcomings on the defensive end. Because the Raptors were running that pick and roll, and they were finding open shooters. And with Klay Thompson out and DeMarcus being limited, that's what led to the 17 threes. So where will Klay Thompson's biggest impact come from tonight? Offensively or defensively? I'm happy that he's playing, but I can't imagine that he's going to be able to move at anything close to full speed. And maybe his injury was enough to keep him out of an NBA Finals game. So I don't want to minimize it as if maybe his injury wasn't that serious. He missed an NBA Finals game. There's something to that. So where will he have his biggest impact? Or will he not have an impact at all? And what will Kawhi Leonard's impact be? Is this Kawhi Leonard's big night? He hasn't had that signature moment yet, and it's insane to say this. Dude is averaging 29 points per game. But when you go back to the Raptors' win in Game 1, I tend to think more about what Pascal Siakam did. When I go back to the win in Game 3, I tend to think about how great the starting five of the the starting five of the Toronto Raptors played. It wasn't a Kawhi Leonard signature performance like he had in Game 7 against Philadelphia. It wasn't that take over and dominate performance. We saw Danny Green. We saw Fred VanVleet. We saw Serge Ibaka. We saw Pascal Siakam. We saw everybody play their role to perfection in Game 3. We saw Siakam be damn near dominant in Game 1. We haven't had that Kawhi Leonard moment yet. Is that moment coming tonight? It's amazing to think that it might be one of the quietest 29 points per game. He is having a tremendous series. And he's absolutely walking towards an NBA Finals MVP again, by the way, a second one if Toronto manages to beat the Warriors in this series. But so far, it's been uneventful. It's just been quiet. It's fit Kawhi Leonard's personality brilliantly, right? Quiet and unassuming and incredibly, incredibly effective. One last question I'll leave you with here as Game 4 of the NBA Finals is tonight. Would the Warriors just be better off if they ruled Kevin Durant out? Because now players are starting to be asked a question very similar to that. And Sean Livingston responded, yeah, we're starting to get into the mindset of maybe he's just not going to play in this series. Which means they're thinking about it. Would it be better if you just eliminated that thought? And I guess you have to weigh the benefit of it. What's the greater benefit? Bringing back a version of Kevin Durant, and we have no idea what version that's going to be? Or would it be better to just, KD, bad timing, we're not comfortable with where you at. We saw Greg Popovich do this. We saw Greg Popovich do this with the bizarre Kawhi Leonard situation last year, where he said, we've gotten to the point in the season where we just have to move on. No matter how Kawhi Leonard feels, we're not playing him. We have to move on with what we have. Would the Golden State Warriors be better off just saying, we've got to move on? We're going to allow, KD's going to rehab. He's going to just keep doing his thing. We're just operating now under the assumption that he's not playing. He is not playing anymore. And if they get into a Game 7 situation and Kevin Durant, rips the button-up shirt and he's got the Superman uniform on underneath it and he comes out and plays, okay, fine. But eliminate questions for the next couple of days, because right now you're down 2-1. And this conversation is only going to be greater if you go down 3-1. As a matter of fact, the longer this series goes, the louder that conversation is going to be. But I also understand the line of not ruling out. You give Kevin Durant something to work for, and you believe he'll be effective whenever he gets out on the floor, or whatever version of him gets out there on the floor. Can't thank you enough for tuning in here to the show. I hope you enjoyed the game tonight. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. And I know I said this earlier. I want to say it one more time to you. Thank you for making the first week of the podcast with Damien Barling a huge, huge success. I, honest to goodness, had no idea what to expect launching a daily podcast. But you guys made me feel like there was a market for it. You guys made me feel like this was something that you would enjoy. So I'm happy to put in the work for it. I'm happy to put in the money. I'm happy to put into the grind to this because you're there and you have responded. And I absolutely love that. I can't thank you enough. So thank you for an amazing first week here of this podcast. And here's to many, many, many more. Have a fantastic weekend. We will see you Monday here at noon on the podcast with Damien Barling.